Welcome. Before we dive in, I want to share a quick note. In this episode, you may notice some natural background sounds, such as birds, cars, and the environment. I like to think of it as adding to the feeling of connection and presence, as Natania lives across the world from me in Indonesia. In today's episode, Natania and I discuss human design, abundance, and what it really means to live in alignment with yourself. If you're not familiar with human design, some parts of the conversation may feel a little esoteric. I invite you to listen with an open heart. Even if some of the language is new, the deeper message is about tuning into yourself and finding ways to live your life with more ease, clarity, and purpose. And since we're entering fall this week, it's the perfect opportunity for change and reflection. I think this conversation is a beautiful reminder that abundance and alignment can look very different for each of us. I hope you enjoy. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we have a very special guest. Natania Setyadi is a human design consultant, conscious business coach, sound healer, and astrologer. Through her offerings, she helps people live their strategy, align their energy, and move forward in a way that's aligned and powerful. In this episode, we're exploring how to experience abundance, not through pressure or forced manifesting, but through alignment, understanding your energy, honoring your design, and releasing the guilt or shame that arises when manifesting feels like a performance. Welcome, Natania.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so happy you're here. To begin, could you please share what human design is and what it means to live your design?
Yeah, so human design is actually a newer modality that was sort of cognized in the 80s by a man called Hu, and it is a combination of four ancient modalities. So it's newer in the sense that like all four have been put together, but the four that it's based on are very old. And they are the Chinese I Ching, Western astrology, the chakras, and the Kabbalah tree of life. And you don't really need to know much about any of those modalities, but basically combined in this modality we call human design, it really focuses on how we use our energy. So it's about our energy exchange with other people and with the universe and the world around us. So manifesting generators, they're the most common. There's about 35% of the population is a generator, 35% is a manifesting generator. So they're quite similar in the way that they function. So it's really interesting that about 70% of the world function in very similar ways. Then we have projectors that are about 20% of the population, manifestors that are about 9%, and then the reflectors are only 1% of the world.
Hmm. And what type are you?
I'm a manifesting generator.
Okay, so just like me.
Yeah. So we're pretty common. Not in a bad way.
Amazing.
That's important to say.
Let's dive more into this idea of manifesting with human design. And so you often emphasize alignment over manifesting. Can you explain why manifesting can feel heavy or even discouraging for many people?
I think the thing with manifesting is that oftentimes it comes from like the brain or the ego, right? Of like, I want these things. And well, first of all, in human design, it's really interesting. When you look up the chart, there are these funny shapes, and they're called energy centers. And there's two that looks like it's in the head. And I mean, they are in the head, but interestingly, they're not in the brain. And so in human design, it's really important to note that we don't use our brains to make decisions. So the brain is really from understanding things. So it's like if you see an airplane and you're like, how does that fly? That's what we use our brains for, to understand that. but we're not really supposed to be using it to make decisions, whether big or small, in our lives. It's not the thing that we rely on to bring us alignment. Um, and so I think manifesting a lot of times comes again from that brain place of saying, I want that thing, whether it's because it's pretty or it's nice and you want it, or maybe even if it's something that is aligned for you, but you're like, I want it to happen now instead of whenever it is that it's because it hasn't happened yet, and I'm impatient and I want it to happen now. And what modalities like human design, like astrology, what they help us do is to align with the inherent timings of our souls, of our lifetimes, um, instead of our brains. And the other thing too that I think can be a little bit of a pitfall when it comes to manifesting is um, that sometimes it can make us feel like we're doing something wrong, right? So whatever it is that you want but don't have yet, and you look around and all your friends and your peers all have it already, whatever it is, a certain amount of money, a partner, a particular job, a particular title, etc. And it can make it feel like you're doing something wrong because you haven't been able to manifest that for yourself. And those other people have been able to. And and then it kind of inadvertently, I think, can lead to this feeling of inadequacy, right? Like, what am I doing wrong? Why am I not enough in order to make this thing happen? And alignment takes all of that out of the equation, because sometimes for you, you're not supposed to experience that just yet. You're supposed to be focusing on something else right now. And I think when we realize that, we're more able to utilize our time and our efforts in a way that actually yields a better return. You actually get more bang for your buck, for every little um, effort that you put out, you get more back, versus when you're trying to push against the tide, basically.
And I love this idea as well because it gets you out of that comparison mindset of feeling like you're behind or you're not enough, and takes that attention back into yourself where you focus on your own alignment and your own strategy. And before we dive in deeper, I'd also love to ask how people can find out what their human design is.
Yeah, so my favorite website is myhumandesign.com. And then it's just much more user friendly. Some of the other softwares for human design is a little bit there's a lot of information and it can get really overwhelming. And I know that from experience too. Like once upon a time was the first time I ever saw a human design chart, and it confused me too with all of the numbers and weird different places, and it doesn't make sense. Um, so yeah, so my human design is a really great resource, and then you're just going to need your birthday, your birth time, and then the city where you were born to pull up your chart.
And how long have you been learning about human design? I feel like you've been in this for so long.
I mean, I don't know if it was so long exactly, but it was definitely during COVID. That was when I think a lot of people made a really big shift
Hmm.
and a lot of questioning, right? Like, what are we doing? What's the meaning of our lives? All of those questions.
I love that this is just another tool and resource for us to learn more about ourselves and our purpose and what makes us happy.
Yeah. And if I could just say another thing about human design that is really nice in terms of helping us understand ourselves better is I hear from people sometimes who are afraid to do readings for things like astrology and human design because they're afraid to hear something bad. They're
Mm.
afraid to hear, like, basically bad news, right? Because we can't change our charts. We were born at the time that we were born, and this is the chart that you have. And first of all, it does slightly depend. There's lots of different types of astrology. Western astrology is what I do, but there's Vedic astrology, there's Chinese astrology, so they're all going to be slightly different. But in human design, the really nice thing about it is that it's not negative or positive. it's really just like different, I call them different quirks. We're all a little bit quirky in our own ways. We all have these weird eccentricities. And so human design just helps us to understand like your flavor of quirk. So it's nice that it's not something you have to be scared of. But I also think, in terms of how I use astrology, it's yes, on a textbook level, there may be things that are quote unquote bad or quote unquote negative, but it's really about bringing awareness to it and the consciousness around it, and then understanding how to work with that energy. So it's not actually something to ever be scared of because nothing in it is ever condemning. It's not something that's going to be like, you're never going to be happy. Like, it's not going to be anything like that. It's just areas of growth.
I love that you mentioned this because before I started diving into astrology and human design, that is definitely something that I was scared of.
Yeah, because it makes you feel helpless, right? It makes you feel like, okay, if I did have this bad thing in my chart and I should have been born, an hour early instead of when I was born, or whatever it is, then I could have escaped all of this. It Because I think a lot of other things in our lives, it's like you put more effort, you study more, you work harder, you put in more hours, and then you can overcome this hardship. And when it's like built into your chart, there's not that much you can do about it. So I think that's why it can feel scary for a lot of people.
This is unrelated, but have you heard of the app CoStar?
Hmm.
And that's what it makes me think of, where you put in your information for people who aren't familiar, and you can friend or link up with someone that you are in relationship with, or a friend or a family member, and then you can see how compatible you are. And sometimes when I see how compatible I am, I'm like, oh no. And I feel like it's such an important thing to remember for both astrology and human design, that it's not a life sentence. It's just information that you can use for yourself and for your relationships and career and whatever it is.
Exactly. And sometimes too, like it can become a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Like you pull up your chart, let's say with ours, and before we even become friends, before we even know each other, and then it's like, oh, you two are not going to get along. It's just going to feed into your subconscious and thinking, okay, well, I'm not even going to try, maybe, or whatever, right? And vice versa. Um, but the other thing too that's really important to note, um, in both of these modalities, is that we grow into our charts. I had an astrology teacher very early on, um, say, like, if we were able to make hiring decisions, for example, with astrology, so being able to have someone's birth chart in front of you along with their resume, it seems like it would be a really great way to understand someone. Um, but it's actually not a great way. It's not actually something you would want to do because we need time to grow into our charts. So let's say maybe in your chart you have really amazing leadership potential. So then you think, oh, okay, this is an amazing person to hire because of that. But we don't know where they are on their journeys. They may not have sort of grown into that potential yet, or they may have chosen to completely put zero effort or emphasis or concentration or energy or whatever it is into that area of their life, and so it's just kind of underdeveloped for all we know. Um, and it's really important to say that too with dating, with romantic partners, because I think oftentimes it can be really fun to think like, oh, let me look up their charts, and it can it can do a disservice to the human that's in front of you when you are using their charts in a way that's like you're trying to find out information about them that they haven't shown you. So I think
Mhm.
like for fun, it's totally okay, but just I would want to caution people over really taking it super duper seriously because at the end of the day, each astrologer's interpretation of two people's charts is always going to be slightly different. And so then it is a matter of, you know, how the algorithm in CoStar and all of these apps are programmed. And it can give you slightly different, I could maybe look at two people's charts and be like, they should get along amazingly. And then CoStar is like, nope, you should, you're awful for each other. Like, it probably wouldn't be that stark, but it is possible, just depending on how what parts of the chart co-stars pulling from, and I don't know, right? Maybe let's say, for example, it's only looking at the sun signs and nothing else, um, which we never want to do. Sun sign compatibility is, again, it discounts the full 360-degree view of the human in front of you. Um, but yeah, I could go on and on and on about apps.
You've already started diving into this, but could you please share how astrology and human design relate to one another?
Yeah, so the way that we pull up a human design chart is based off of astrology. Like I said, it's one of the four modalities that makes up human design, and we use the placement of the planets, um, and they activate different gates, so all the different numbers in your human design chart. So um, from a pure sort of like function place, that's how the astrology piece comes into human design. Um, But basically, the way that I always like to describe it is human design is like an instruction manual for your life. It helps you make decisions in the day to day, and it helps you to align your actions in the day to day. And then astrology can give you a lot of specific detail as well. Don't get me wrong, but astrology is really good at giving you the big picture. So it gives you not just a big picture of who you are, but also a lot of the different timings in your life. There's so many different techniques and so many different things that we can do with your astrology chart to pull up different information. And I always like to say that it's like Google Maps, you know, when you can like really zoom out and you see the different um, like the different routes of how you can get to a particular place. So it gives you a kind of like a big bird's eye overview, whereas human design is a little bit more micro and then astrology is more macro. But they're both amazing. They do different things. This isn't a question I get a lot when, you know, people will ask me, which reading should I get? Like, which one is better? And you know, if you ask someone who's just a human design reader, they'll say human design. If you ask someone who's just an astrologer, they'll say astrology. But for me, I was drawn to both because I really saw the benefits of both. So it's really not a matter of one being better than the other. They do different things. So it's just a matter. I mean, I recommend everyone get both, both readings, and not necessarily from me, from anyone, because I do think that they're that beneficial. But which one is better depends on what kind of information you're looking for.
And I know you offer a really incredible bundle for both astrology and human design, and we could definitely talk about that later and link it down below.
Yeah, it would be great.
And then circling back to this idea of manifesting with human design, how does understanding our human design chart help us invite abundance in a way that feels true and not like we're putting in more effort or hoping the universe rewards us?
So, a really key concept in human design is actually passivity. So, in in human design, or like from the point of view of the teachings of human design, um, the whole of humanity over, you know, generations and generations. It's not in our lifetime, but the flow of humanity, where it's going, is actually going more towards passivity. And even even in our lives now, what human design teaches us is to let go of the reins, and then allow the universe to send us what is meant for us. And the way that the universe sends us that those cues for alignment of like, hey, you should be doing this thing, not that thing, it's going to differ depending on your energy type. But I actually found that to be really comforting, you know, as someone who used to be very high strung, very type A, very also really anxious to be frank, um, and always thinking, you know, like if I don't do the work, then it's never going to get done. Like I can only rely on myself. Um, Understanding human design in that, like, okay, all you have to do is just kind of align to where you're meant to be. You show up, and then the universe is going to fulfill its other kind of half of the deal and then send you what's meant for you is actually, it sounds really scary at first, right? But it is actually so much more comforting, understanding that you don't have to push, you actually don't have to strive. Um, there's there's this really great book by Wayne Dyer, and I highlighted it over and over again in the part where he says, "Stop striving and start arriving." And
Mm.
human design a lot is really really great for helping us to understand how to just arrive instead of constantly striving. So when we're talking about like how do we invite more abundance in, it's actually just by letting go, by not just letting go completely, right? I think that's sometimes the misunderstanding too of feeling like, okay, so then here I was pedaling my boat and now I just like completely take my hands off the pedal and then I just chill. And it's not like that, because we do still have a say. We do all have free will, and that's definitely important to say. Um, but it's about, again, aligning us to where, following our strategy and our authority, which again depends on our energy types, to put you in the right place. So for example, you and I were both manifesting generators. This also applies to generators too. The only determining factor when making decisions is whether or not it lights you up, whether or not it excites you. And so if flying, to a trip to Alaska, and that's what excites you, then you go. And maybe you don't really know what you're meant to be doing there. You don't really know like what's going to happen there, but that's the passivity piece of it. But you've already aligned yourself because that was the thing that lit you up, and you took the action. So passivity doesn't mean completely zero action and zero um, choices and zero decisions. It doesn't mean that at all. It just means a little bit more of trusting that the universe has our back, and the universe knows a little bit more. That's not just a little bit. The universe knows a lot more than we do.
And I think that's such an important reminder. And how you mentioned that there can be this level of anxiety if you're always pushing and looking forward into the future. And in psychology, we have that saying where when you're too stuck in the past too often, you're depressed. And then if you're too far in the future, you're stuck in that feeling of anxiety. And I love that reminder that this human design concept brings you right back to yourself and that the universe has you and you don't need to worry so much or get stuck in what went wrong or any mistakes that you've made. So thank you for
Yeah,
sharing that.
exactly. Exactly. And I always say, too, when I do readings to clients, and this is, the first time they've ever heard these concepts, and they're kind of like, oh, okay, this is a lot. I wonder how I can start putting this into practice. I always say, start with really small things. Again, like following what lights you up. When you're choosing what cup of tea to make in the morning, you're looking at like a green tea and an English breakfast and a chamomile and a peppermint. Which one lights you up more? Don't think about like, okay, well, it's the morning, so I need caffeine, but not too much caffeine. And, like, again, that's our brain, right? That's our silly human brains entering the picture. So just look at it and go, which one lights me up? It's like, okay, I wouldn't have chosen chamomile first thing in the morning, but this is what's lighting me up today. And you just trust. And when you when you see the benefits of how, for example, oh wow, it turns out then 20 minutes later, your friend calls you up and asks you to get a cup of coffee with her, and you're like, this is perfect because I only had a chamomile tea. I'm not, going to be super caffeinated. Like when you see how well it pans out with the smaller decisions, then it gives you the strength and the trust to be able to trust it, trust this sort of system to help you align and make bigger decisions down the line.
Something that I love about your messaging in your specific languaging is it feels more gentle and compassionate. And what I've seen a lot on social media or online is this idea of not enough, where they're unintentionally perhaps implying that you're not enough if things don't show up for you. How might we reframe this in more of that compassionate language aligned with design and flow?
So, in terms of timing, I definitely rely more so on astrology because when we really dive deep into our astrology charts, um, it gives us so much information. So for example, Saturn is a planet of restriction. It's also going to slow things down. Saturn is the planet that really likes structure and responsibility. So a lot of the time, what it does is it slows things down, depending on where it is in your chart. And it doesn't do it from a place of just being annoying. It's getting you to pause and go slowly so that you can build up that structure properly. So, for example, when you know that Saturn is strong in your chart, let's say in terms of career, then it gives us it gives us context and understanding that okay, you might be 25 and all your other friends are doing this and that and you feel like you're behind. It's not because you're doing something wrong. Also, 25 is so young. I don't know why I chose that as the example, but it gives you the understanding that you're not doing anything wrong. You're not actually behind. Think of like the tortoise and the hare, right? The tortoise looks like he's behind and is doing something wrong, and we can get caught up into that thinking of um, what am I doing wrong? Why is it that all of that comparison game that you were talking about? What are they doing right that I'm missing out on? Things like that, and it gives us the perspective and awareness to be like, okay, so that's going to be a little bit later on for me. So what should I be focusing on now? What can I be focusing on now? So that's just something that's specifically in your birth chart. But then another thing in astrology that we look at a lot is transits, which is basically how the planets in the sky right now is activating different parts of your birth chart. So your birth chart that we pull up with your exact birth time down to the minute, that doesn't ever change. But it's going to get activated in different ways at different times by the planets in the sky right now. And so understanding that too gives us the awareness of saying, okay, so maybe for X amount of time, maybe it's 3 months, maybe it's 3 years, maybe it's, however long, this is not the area of life that you should be pressing the gas pedal in you know and it's not to say that everything is going to be a complete pause. It's just maybe, let's say, again, using the example of work, this isn't the time for you to press the gas pedal in your work life, but maybe it is the time to press the gas pedal in your home life. Maybe it's a time for your friends, maybe it's time for your own self-growth, things like that. And so I really want to remind people to use their astrology. That's how we can use astrology to help us. It's about giving us the understanding and the awareness that to live more in flow with our own individual timing instead of automatically assuming that faster and bigger is better.
Hmm. So that compassionate languaging piece comes into honoring your own timing and your own life and what's going on right in front of you.
Yeah, because the thing is, it's not it's not something that we can push. It's not a matter of will, it's not a matter of effort. When the energy really is just not there in your chart, no matter what you do, it's not really going to. I'm not going to say that it's not going to happen per se. We do have free will, but it's going to be so difficult that don't we want more flow in
Mhm.
all areas of our lives? And so would you rather be spending all your time pedaling upstream against the current, or would you rather spend time pedaling with the current, where each stroke of your pedal gets you further down? And um, and I think, understanding that there's a time for everything. It's not to say that you're ever going to miss out on anything. There's a time for when everything is supposed to happen. And so living more in alignment with your own individual timing is going to yield you so much more results, so much more ease and flow and happiness and lack of anxiety, peace, I guess you would call that. Um, yeah, which I think I've definitely grown. Like the older I've gotten, I really started to value that more and more.
It's like the difference between worrying and planning ahead, where if you're going on a road trip or something and you worry, like, what if I run out of food or out of water and I don't have snacks? Or if you plan ahead and you just say, I have my snacks in the car, and then you're on the road and you're in your car and you're just moving on the highway. That's what comes to mind for me.
Yeah, and there are those rest stops everywhere. And so then if you decide how, if you realize halfway through you're like, oh, I didn't pack enough snacks, like you can stop and buy snacks along the way too. I think sometimes we put too much pressure on ourselves to anticipate everything before we even take a step. And sometimes you need to have taken a few steps before you realize that, oh, I needed that thing and I didn't realize. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think it's I think it's not even normalizing like compassion to, it's okay if you forgot something. It's okay that you hadn't thought of needing this extra, jacket or whatever on your road trip. Um, I don't know why I said jacket, but um, again, sometimes like you need to have taken a few steps to even understand, oh, okay, this is why a jacket is needed and is useful. So I think it really takes the pressure off of really feeling like you have to have everything figured out, because we are not supposed to ever really be able to anticipate everything in our lives. Otherwise, it's no fun, right? Like
Mm.
surprise and discovery is such um, valuable things in our lives. It's like when you see a little kid and they see something for the very first time and their eyes just pop out and their jaws fall and they're just like, oh my God, that is the most amazing thing in the world. Like we get older and we think that like surprise and discovery is bad because it means we haven't done our homework. When instead we should hold on to that feeling of awe, um, because there is still so much to discover.
Sometimes I think with so much information and so much going on, people can feel stuck or blocked. And I love what you were saying earlier for us manifesting generators, how we ask, does this light us up? Like, does this feel good? And then we go forward from there. I'm curious if you have like a little spiffy saying or something that people can take with them if they're the other types.
Yeah, so again, with the manifesting generators and the generators, basically, if it's not a hell yes, it's a hell no. Um,
Mm.
if it's like, oh, I think so, like that's a no. You will know if it's a yes. For the projectors, they have to wait to be invited. And I guess have to is maybe the wrong way of saying it. But for them, it's about aligning themselves with the right audience. So basically, think of it as like no one likes unsolicited advice, right? And projectors, they have so much valuable information that if they don't align themselves with the right audience by waiting until someone invites them to share, um, it'll feel like they're giving unsolicited advice. And that's not going to make their audience happy. It's not going to make them happy. So that's the reason why it sounds really disempowering until you dig into it a little bit and understand that again it's all about alignment. It's aligning you with the people who are ready and want to hear what you have to share as a projector. Manifestors, interestingly, they're the only type who are ever supposed to initiate. So
Mm.
91% of the world, we are passive, and we're supposed to be pretty passive. Manifestors will just randomly get an urge to do something, and so the way that they align is when that ping comes, that urge comes, for them to take action, to do it, and when they do it, to tell people about it. Um, it sounds simple, and yet, talk to your manifestor friends. They can have a little bit of a hard time with that. Because sometimes you can get into the feeling of like, well, does anyone else care? Does anyone else want to do this? Am I going against the grain too much? Things like that. But from a sort of conditioning perspective, they have a little bit less conditioning in that sense of they are meant to take action. Whereas everyone else, we have to learn to be more passive they get to be a little bit more proactive. And then the reflectors, they are, what's aligned for them is to wait. They need to realize that, again, as I've been saying, faster isn't better. And for them, making their decisions, finding what's aligned for them is going to take, traditionally they say like a full lunar cycle, so 28 days. It may not necessarily take all 28 days, but instead of making, a spontaneous decision to go to Alaska, they should wait about 28 days to see if it is still aligned for them or not before they take action. And so it's really about aligning themselves with what their environment is showing them is going to be aligned for them, and then just taking their sweet time. Reflectors are actually really lucky in that, because it sounds bad in our societal conditioning of faster is better, right? But they're actually really lucky that the universe supports them so much more than it supports the rest of us. Because again, they don't really have to do anything for those 28 days. They're just chilling, and then things just sort of arrive and they show themselves. So so see what I mean? They're like not good or bad. Neither of them you can really say is like, oh, that's a good one, that's a bad one. They're all just like different flavors, and then it's just about aligning yourself with which one is going to work for you. And in human design, it's all or nothing, which means that like you and I, we're 100% manifesting generator and we're 0% projector. So it's not a matter of like finding your mix of all of these things. Like you are just a manifesting generator.
Would we be able to use the idea of either creating content or posting content on Instagram or any social media platform and see what would be most aligned for each one?
What do you mean?
If someone's listening to this and they're a specific type and they're thinking about posting more on social media in order to grow their business, how would they go about aligning with their human design?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the generators and the manifesting generators, it's not just the topic itself, right? So you should only share about the topic that is exciting to you right now, but it's also the format. And so if the reels don't excite you and you like the carousel, then keep doing the carousel. Even though the algorithm is going to push the reels, even though the algorithm is going to push the video, like you do whichever one lights you up. The manifestors, it's not so much for them to say, try this thing. It's just they might be really quiet for a long time. They may not post for like 3 months, and then all of a sudden they're like, this thing is amazing. So it's not even necessarily like a you should do this, it's just I'm doing this thing. And then just them taking action in doing that thing makes everyone else go, oh, I want to do that thing too. So for the manifestor, definitely it's okay. Again, don't think of the algorithm like punishing you because you're not a frequent enough poster. Just only post when you get that urge. Otherwise, just chill. The projectors, it's more so, I think, like, what are people asking you about? Like in your day-to-day life outside of social media, what are they wanting to hear from you about? And so that's the thing that you share about. Even better if people are literally asking you on social media, "Ooh, can you send us, recipes?" Because you keep posting pictures of your lunch, and everyone is like, "Oh my goodness, what is that?" Like, send us the recipe for that, and even better. Um, and then the reflectors, again, it's really more so, I think, about like, this is the thing I'm contemplating. Like, so this is the thing I'm thinking about right now. Maybe I'm kind of thinking about Alaska. Like, let's see what happens. And maybe within those 28 days or so, um, you go through some ups and downs of like, maybe I'm not going to go to Alaska. Maybe I'm going to go to South America instead. Or like, oh, I'm really excited about this thing about Alaska, about the Northern Lights and the snow and the whatever. And then, so it's being non-attached to it too, right? Because it could be that you spent 28 days talking about Alaska, and then at the end you're like, you know what, we're going to South America afterwards. And it may feel like, you just made all this content and everyone got so excited about you going to Alaska, and then like you did end up going. But yeah, I think it's more so, that's where I would sort of take it in terms of social media, and less so about like telling people what to do, or like not telling people what to do, but that thing of like, you should do this thing. Have you guys heard of that thing? And it's really more just about like your own, what you're experiencing, how it's kind of making you feel, and sharing more of that.
And what would you say to the person who has a difficult time trusting themselves?
I think the person who has a little bit of difficulty trusting themselves probably hasn't dive dove dived into these modalities, because these modalities help you to understand yourself better, and help you to understand how to, um, give yourself a little bit more slack. Again, showing you that like this isn't your fault. This is just kind of something that is within your energetic signature, and it's not good or bad, right? Because our souls, our higher selves, chose this particular chart because these are the skills. They're kind of like tools in your tool belt that you're going to need for your adventures in this lifetime. And we also come into this world wanting and needing to learn certain things too. And so, the thing that can be really beneficial with these modalities is not just about how we go forward, but really just about understanding ourselves, and giving ourselves more compassion. So, like for example, for me, I've always been a pretty blunt person without even really realizing it. Not in any kind of way where I try to intentionally be, like poking people, right? With how blunt I am. Um, and I've heard it over and over again in my life of people telling me like, you need to tone it down. Like you're being way too blunt. You're saying too many things, and maybe not the correct way, in the correct place, and things like that. And I never really understood it. I didn't, because to me, I wasn't trying to be subversive. I wasn't trying to activate people, or try to push them in any kind of way. And then when I discovered astrology and saw that I have my Mercury is in Aries. So Mercury is the planet of communication. Aries is a very blunt planet. It's very act now, think later kind of. Oh no, sorry. Aries as a sign. Um, Aries as a sign is a very blunt planet, and Aries is act now, think later. And so then understanding that that is where my Mercury is, it's it's not about trying to, first of all, it kind of gives you the context, right? Of like, oh, okay, that's why she doesn't realize that she's being so blunt. It sort of just is innate. But then it kind of gives you the understanding that, like, so the opposite of Aries, in astrology, we work with a lot of polarities, or opposites. So the opposite of Aries is Libra. Libra is a sign that's very caring, very lovey-dovey, very like aware of how everyone else feels. It's going to be the complete opposite in terms of really understanding how to, communicate to people in a really nice, soft, beautiful way. Like my Mercury is never really going to be able to do that. No matter how hard I try, it's never going to be able to get to the point of someone with a Mercury in Libra in their charts. And so understanding how to work with mine and my Mercury of where it is definitely something I need to learn in this lifetime, but also understanding the values of it too, right? Like sometimes you do need someone to have the guts to say, okay, we've been going around and around in circles because we didn't want to offend anyone else. We didn't want to push any buttons. And we've been at this for 2 weeks. So, like, come on. Like sometimes you do need that person. And so understanding that like that is where I could be really effective, and understanding that it's not about turning down the volume, or it's not about holding myself back from speaking or from communicating, and understanding the right ways to do it. And things like that. Like it's how it can be really helpful to helping us to understand our energetic imprint and working with what it is that we have in our charts instead of trying to fight it or trying to craft or mold ourselves into like what society thinks we should be. Like another example I like to use is like introversion and extroversion.
Mm.
Not getting into the actual proper psychology definitions of them, of like how you get your energy, but just, extroversion is loud and confident, and introversion is a little bit more shy and quiet. Society tells us that being extroverted is better, being confident and louder, if you will, is better than being quiet and shy. But if quiet and shy is what's in our innate nature, again, trusting that this is the energy that we're supposed to have in this lifetime, in whatever way, shape, or form we're supposed to kind of learn and work with that, um, is going to bring us, back to that word alignment, right? Back to how we're supposed to live. It's going to give us a lot more peace and comfort in our own bodies. I think that's something that's really underrated too, right? Of feeling like you could be the most successful person, but it's like a front, it's like a mask. It feels like you're acting in front of everyone. And that's not going to be the way to a fulfilling life, even if you have millions and millions of dollars or acclaim or the big title and everything, right? Like the more valuable thing compared to all of those external things is how you feel in your own body.
Mm. And just like we grow into our human design, it's like growing into that idea of self acceptance and who we are as we change with life.
Yeah, it's never going to be something that we truly master. It's like healing. There's you think you're done and it's like, oh no, it goes deeper. There's a deeper level, and then you think you're done with that and it goes into a deeper level. But that's again where the fun is.
This has been such an amazing conversation. And just because I want to be mindful of time, is there anything you want to leave with us? Any takeaway?
Yeah, I think basically think value what is correct and aligned for you versus valuing what society and what other people tell us is good or important. Um, my meditation teacher works with a ton of billionaires, like actual literal billionaires, and he always tells us like, if money is the key to happiness, then these guys wouldn't need me. But they literally will come to me and say, I have all this money, all this acclaim, all the success, et cetera, and I'm not happy. So can you help me be happy? And I think it takes courage to be subversive. It takes courage to think, okay, that's what society tells me is important, but I'm going to go a different way. But once you do that, and once you experience, again, all of those things that we're talking about, how good it feels in your body, the alignment, the compassion, then it's like you can't ever go back because you realize that um, this is the thing that's going to give you fulfillment. This is the thing that's going to give you um, peace and happiness. Like, when did we start talking about the value and the virtue of happiness? And it's not to say that when you do that, you're not going to have, because I think that's the other thing too, right? A lot of people think that it's like either or. If I have the self fulfillment, then I'm not going to have the 6 cars and the mansion and the $1 million. And that's not necessarily the case. But it's also like, why do we think that all those things are going to give us happiness anyway? Um, like there's a study. I need to look up exactly what the amount is, but there's a study where that shows that like if you don't have much money at all, then yes, every incremental dollar makes you happier. But at a certain point, and I think it's actually it's actually not a large amount. I think it's something in the $90,000 range. Um, Once you make that, anything above that actually does very little in terms of how much it makes you happier. And yet we still think that, again, the second house, the second car, the fifth car, the more millions of dollars, that's what's going to give us more happiness. And it's been shown, like quantifiably proven, that after that specific point, every other dollar you make is not really going to make that much of a difference. And so, focusing on all of this other stuff, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to have all of these fun human things as well. Um, it can, and you probably will still. But then it also gives you the awareness that that's not everything. That you actually don't need all of those things to be happy. And granted, I like nice things just as much as anyone else. My background is in luxury fashion. But do we really need all those things to be happy? No. Um, I think, again, arriving, right? We want to do more arriving and less striving. Um, so yeah, I think that's my last note.
That's beautiful. And manifesting isn't how much money you have or anything you can show outside of you. It's more than that. I think that's such a beautiful takeaway. And out of curiosity, is your meditation teacher Jack Cornfield?
No, his name is Tom Knowles.
I feel like Jack Cornfield says something very similar. And I think he's also referenced that study. And I think that's something that I want to look into as well.
Yeah, yeah.
And if people want to work with you, how can they find you?
They can find me on Instagram, just my full name, Natania Setyadi, or my website, also the same, nataniasetyadi.com.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Natania, for sharing your wisdom and heart with us today. I know our listeners are walking away with such a deeper understanding of human design and how we can use it as a tool for self awareness and alignment. If you'd like to learn more about Natania's work, I'll link her website and resources in the show notes below. Thank you for listening and being part of this conversation. My hope is that you take one insight from today and experiment with it in your own life, whether that's noticing how your energy feels, giving yourself permission to follow what feels aligned, or simply being more compassionate with yourself in the process. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with a friend who might benefit. Until next time, take care of your mind, body, and heart.